Hi everyone, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's just give others a couple of more minutes so that people can join in and then we'll start, okay? Okay, is my screen visible to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, we have 9 participants. Again, we'll just give one more minute, excuse me, for people to join in. Okay, can some of you turn your videos on just so that I can see people instead of talking to a computer screen? Just turn your video on and then you can turn it off later if you're not comfortable. That's fine. Okay, let's just get started then. All right. We have about 12 participants. I know that people will start trickling in later. Let's just go ahead and then get started. Just to let you know, guys, I'm a little sick today. So, excuse me, excuse all my coughing. We'll try and, try to make it seamless. But if I'll have to stop and then cough a little bit, please excuse me for that. Okay, I'm still audible to everybody, right? And everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the online lecture organized by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. This class is for MA English first year students. This course is course 2 titled American Literature. And this, I think, is your second class for the day, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so before we get into the actual class, let me just give some instructions for the classes, okay? And then let you know how this course will be organized and then how your course book is organized, okay? Please stop me whenever you have any questions. You can either unmute yourself and then stop me, or you can write it in the chat box and then send it if that is more convenient for you, whatever is convenient for you. All right. Okay. So the instructions for the class is please try to be on time. I know you don't have any breaks between classes and sometimes it's not possible to, join immediately. I understand that. So don't feel stressed or anything, but try to be on time as much as possible. Okay. And then keep your cell phones on mute. If you are unmuted, please keep your cell phones on mute so that, we don't hear music or your ringtones and everything. And just keep yourself also on mute. Just check regularly because with this online setup, sometimes we just, inadvertently, we just unmute ourselves and then we start talking. In the previous online session, we had to hear a complete conversation about somebody buying a home. Okay, for like half an hour or so. With that nice lady just unmuted herself and then, started talking about home buying. So while she gave us a lot of good tips, that was not the purpose of the class. So please keep yourself on mute. And of course, when you have questions, please unmute and then ask. Okay, and the next instruction is, like I said in the offline classes, I'm not sure how many of you attended the offline classes, but this has to be a participatory session, okay? It cannot be one-sided where I'm just blabbering about American literature and then you're just taking it in. It cannot be that way because we are in a place and time where a classroom has to be participatory. So please do voice out your opinion. Please do ask questions. Please do contribute to the discussion. Everybody is welcome to do it. English is the preferred language, but if you're not comfortable with English, you're welcome to talk in Telugu, Hindi. Those are the two languages that I understand. But if you're comfortable with some other language, that's also fine. We'll find somebody to translate your words, okay? The main thing is participation, not the language. Okay, and then if possible, keep your video on so that I don't have to talk to a computer screen. I can like actually look at people and then talk. But if that is not comfortable, I totally understand. You don't have to turn on your video. All right. And then the last one is, again, like I said, post your questions on the chat box or unmute and then speak. Okay. Are we clear with the instructions?
Yes.
Okay. Let's just go to the excuse me, course book format. Like I said, this course is titled American Literature. This is the course 2 of your syllabus. And it's divided into 5 blocks, 5 really well-structured blocks, I have to say. And then there are 20 units as a whole. Okay, we'll start with block 1, which is basically an introduction to American literature. We'll talk about what American literature is, and then how did it begin, and then we'll talk about what happened to American literature in the past 300, 400 years. And then we'll talk about fiction in block 2. Okay, now in fiction, we'll talk about short stories, we'll talk about novels from a temporal perspective. What I mean is we'll start from the beginning and then we'll keep going through centuries, and we will talk about short stories, what happened to short stories. We'll talk about novels, what happened to short novels, and then what were the major themes that people talked about in American literature. I'm sorry, hold on for 1 second. Oh, that's totally okay, Sandhya. That's not a problem at all. That's okay. Okay, and then in block 3, we will move on to poetry. We'll have an introduction to American poetry. We'll talk about Whitman. We'll talk about Dickinson. We'll talk about other smaller poets. And then we'll talk about Wallace Stevens, Robert Frost. And then we'll move on to contemporary poetry. Okay. And block 4 will deal with drama. And this is the shortest section in American literature because there's not much to talk about American drama, but we will have 2 major plays that we will discuss. One is Eugene O'Neill's Desire Under the Ems and Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. Okay. And then we will move on to block 5, which is titled Recent Trends, but this is kind of a mixed pot for everything. It talks about women's voices, it talks about Jewish writing, talks about African-American literature. Now, all these 3 are extremely big topics in themselves. Okay. So it is It'll be an overstatement to say that this small book will do justice to these three particular topics. But the aim of this book is not actually to make you experts in American literature, but the aim of this book is to provide an introduction. Okay. Excuse me. So you can actually go in two ways. One, read this book and then attempt the questions in the exam and pass, or go further and then read the further readings, or I think there is a section at the end of every chapter that says unit that says recommended books or something like that. Okay, you can go through those books and then, you know, become an expert in American literature. Okay, so it depends on your interest which way you want to go. All right. So just to let you know, we have covered all 5 blocks in our offline sessions, and some of you I know have attended offline sessions. I am not sure. Of course, I recognize Afroz, Aisha, Ishrat, Lily. I think that's it. Is there anybody else who has attended the offline sessions?
Sir, me, Merlin. Good afternoon, sir. Merlin.
Good afternoon, sir. Amol.
Hey,
Merlin,
okay.
sir.
So, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the second one. Amol, is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And me, Merlin, sir.
Okay, hi Merlin. Yeah. So some of you have already attended the offline session. So this will be a repetition for you. Okay. But there might be instances where you have missed some classes in the offline session, or some of the concepts might not be as clear. So this is a good revision. Let's take this as that. Okay. 2 participants have raised their hands. If you have a question, please go ahead. If you don't have a question, then just lower your hand. That's fine. Salman, your hand is raised. If you have a question, please unmute yourself and then go ahead. Okay, that's fine. Okay, coming to the class format, we have 8 classes, I think, and we have 20 units to cover. So approximately we'll cover about 2 to 3 units per class, all right? I know exceptions will happen. We might cover 3 units or 4 units in one class and maybe 1 unit in one class. So those things will happen. And then we will deal with them as they come, all right? Again, for the people who have just joined, I'm a little sick today, so pardon my consistent coughing. All right, let's just move on to block 1, unit 1. This unit 1, block 1 is titled Introduction, Major Themes. Okay, in my opinion, this is the most important unit in this whole book. Why? Because it talks about the most major recurring themes in American literature. Now, why is this important? It is important in 2 ways. One, you will know like a 10,000 feet view of American literature. You will know what authors are talking about. And I'm sorry, okay, I can't go back between the chat and then the lecture, but then I will answer this one question, and then maybe I'll look at the chat at the end of the session. Okay. Somebody is asking, is offline classes on OU Secunderabad or Ambedkar University? No, offline classes happened in Ambedkar Open University maybe a couple of months ago, I think. I'm not sure. I think March or somewhere like that. But anyway. Okay, coming back to our lecture. So recurring themes, you will know about American literature from a 10,000 feet view. You will know exactly what's happening. What are the major themes? What were authors and poets and dramatists talking about in American literature? That's one thing. And the second thing is you can relate this first chapter to pretty much every other chapter, every other unit in the book. Okay. Everything else in the book is basically talking about indirectly or directly about a story. Okay. You just have to know the story and then relate it to unit 1. And that will give you a better answer in your exams. All right. So for two reasons, block 1, unit 1 is the most important one. So from my perspective, every one of you should become an expert on block 1, unit 1. Okay. You read, reread, and reread this unit because it's the most important thing. Okay. So basically the objectives is, like I said, we will talk about the unique features of American literature. We will talk about major and recurring themes. We'll talk about something called Americanness. Okay. This is a very loaded term, and then it is very difficult to define something called Americanness. And then we'll try to define it, and then we'll have a discussion on that. All right. Okay. Are my slides moving? Can anybody confirm, please?
Yes, we're moving.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the second person. What is that? Okay, we'll just continue. So I'm not sure. Okay, just raise your hand if you have a BA English background, please. I just want to know how many of you have an English literature background already. Can you please raise your hand if you... Okay, yeah, I know about Aisha. So it's the same person, right? Aisha Khan and Aisha Mohammed Khan.
No, sir, different person.
No,
Oh,
sir, they
different.
are different.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, because I see two hands raised and then it's the same. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, 2 people, 3. Okay. So only 3 people are from a literature background, right? So let's just, instead of directly jumping into American literature, let's just try and talk about what is literature in the first sense. Okay. So can somebody explain to me what is literature? You don't have to give me a definition or anything, just your opinion on what is literature. What do you consider literature?
If you look at literature through William Shakespeare's point of view, sir, he expresses feelings, be it revenge, hatred, love, through various characters and all of the books that he has written.
Okay. Okay, great. That's one great explanation. Okay. Anybody else? That's from a Shakespearean perspective. But anybody else? What is can somebody give me a general idea of what literature is?
Written work, especially those considered of superior or lasting artistic merit.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Like a great work of literature. Books and writings published on a particular subject.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So like both Merlin and Aisha said, literature is a collection of written work, usually. But this is a broad definition. Okay. You cannot just say this is the definition. Okay. There are multiple definitions of what literature is. One broad definition is it's a collection of written work. So everything, prose, drama, poetry, all these come under literature. Okay. But now that we're saying it's written work is literature, what about oral literature then? So my next question would immediately be, if somebody says literature is written work, so my immediate question will be, okay, but what about oral literature? Especially, folk literature. Let's talk about the Indian context. We have so much of folk literature, which is not written, right? It's transmitted orally. So can we call that also literature?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
even the
Because
language,
literature is the
culture,
last.
arts, everything is considered as literature.
Literature is a mirror of life. We can talk about in this nature anything, personal or fiction. So I guess this is my explanation.
The written work which is last superior or lasting artistic merits, which goes on generations, that is called a literature.
okay. 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 And Suchitra has sent in the chat history. Okay. Just hold on to that thought, Suchitra, because that's a very, very important point that you have just made. Okay. We'll come to that. Just hold on to that point. Okay. I agree with all of you. Okay. I just want a clarification from the person who said folk literature, orally transmitted literature is, sorry, orally transmitted work is not literature. Can you just quickly explain why? Why do you think it is not literature? I'm not sure who said
Pardon,
that.
sir? Can you say once again?
Somebody said orally transmitted work is not literature, right? Can we discuss on why it is not literature? Is it because it is not written, or is it because
If it's in media,
Hmm,
then it can be called as a literature because
okay,
it everyone can see every time.
okay, okay. When you mean media, it can be print or it can be
YouTube
okay,
or
okay,
any
great.
news channel, or it will be every time we can search it.
Excellent. Okay. Okay. So as you can see, we have all come up with, multiple definitions of literature. We've started with written work, and then we've thrown in oral literature there. We have thrown in, electronic literature, like Aisha just said. You can talk about YouTube, documentary films. Those are also literature, and most of this electronic literature is also transcribed. Transcribed basically means converting spoken words into written form. Okay. So transcription also happens. So all this is literature, right? So this is the broad definition. Now we know what literature is. Now the next question is, what is American literature, which is our topic of the day, right? What is American literature? Now this is even tougher than what is literature. Okay. Why? Because when we say something like, excuse me, something like Telugu literature, it is literature written in Telugu, right? And then when I ask you what is Hindi literature, you will immediately say literature written in Hindi. That's obvious, right? But if I ask you what is Indian literature, you can't say it is literature written in Indian, right? Because Indian is not a language, right? So similarly, when someone says American literature, we can't say it is literature written in American, because American is not a language. Okay. But then immediately you will have a question, then what makes something American literature then? How do I define American literature? Okay. Now, one answer might, any ideas? What is American literature?
Yes, sir. I guess I can give a simple answer. American literature is a literature. It's talk about the American people, Americanness, and their adventures, what has happened in their history. So that's the American literature, I guess.
Okay, good. Very good. Thanks, Ishrat. One answer, right? Immediate answer will be when somebody says American literature. I've heard people say that literature produced in US is called American literature. Okay. Now this is kind of sort of okay, Ishrat, but then it is not completely true, right? Like you said, it is
Yes.
not just literature produced in the US, but then it has to talk about the American experience.
Yeah, the Americanness, what the adventure is, was the what they talk about the heroism of America.
Right.
That all.
Right. Good. So basically my point is, if somebody says literature produced in the US is called American literature, then that's not the complete definition, right? Why? Because as an Indian, you can go to US and then write about something, but it cannot be called American literature just because it is produced in the US, right? So for understanding what is American literature, we have to understand what the American experience is. Like Ishrat said, American literature is something that talks about American experience, adventure, and history and everything. But what is American experience? How is it different from experience of the rest of the world, right? So for understanding what American experience is, we'll have to talk about something called the American dream. Okay. Now, like I said in the offline classes, America is the only country which boasts of a Afros, you're right. Experiences of Americans. I'm just reading the chat. Yeah, that's good. America is the only country in the world which talks about a dream. Okay. Like we talked in the offline classes, when I ask you, can you define an Indian dream? Is there an Indian dream?
No.
Right. Why? Because we all have different dreams, right? For me, the dream might be, going and then, sitting on the top of Mount Everest. That can be my dream. Or for somebody else, it might be, leaving the city, going into a village and then farming. For somebody else, it might be vice versa. So all our dreams are different. There is nothing called a common Indian dream, right? And which makes sense, right? Because we are not a homogeneous people. We all have different dreams. Now, America is the only, US is the only country in the world which says there is something called American dream. Now, what is this American dream? If you look at your course book, I think it's on the first page. Talks about this guy, Vernon Parrington, who is a literary historian, US literary historian. He says American dream is the promise of a better, richer, and happier life for all our citizens of every rank. Okay. Now, if you look at this definition, right, hundreds of questions will come up. Why? Because every single word in this particular sentence is very subjective, right? He says the promise of a better for who? Richer than what? And happier than what? For all our citizens of every rank. What ranks is he talking about, right? So every single thing in this is very subjective. So we cannot just say promise of better, richer, and happier life for all our citizens of every rank is the American dream, because again, the American dream for an individual is different from the next person. Okay, because all these are subjective. So for our purposes, right, let us say life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. These are the three things that characterize American dream. Okay, so enjoying life, 1, having liberty in life, having freedom in life, 2, and then pursuit of happiness. Pursuit is basically you go behind happiness. You basically, the end goal is happiness. Okay. These three are the major characteristics of an American dream for our purposes. Okay. We cannot again, pinpoint what is American dream, but for our discussion, this is enough. Now we will go back to our question of what is American literature. Now, American literature, now we can define it as literature that is expression of the American dream. Okay. So what is the quintessential characteristic of American literature? It is the American experience. All right. So unless you have that American experience, you cannot, characterized in that work, you cannot call it an American literature. All right. Excuse me, guys. Give me a second. Okay, let me just gulp some water. Now, in the earlier centuries, there's something that actually played a major role in coming up with this, American dream, the work ethic, and everything in the US. Okay, and that is religion. Okay, and particularly one religion played a major role, which is Christianity. Okay. So in American literature, you will continuously see references to Christianity, concepts of Christianity, fables from the Bible, Old Testament specifically. You will find a lot of references to Christianity. Okay, so that becomes a very integral part of American literature. Okay, now let's just go into the recurring themes. In American literature. I know somebody. Yeah, before we go into the themes, right, let me make one point. Okay, like I think it was Suchitra, is that right? And Rumina. Oh yeah, like Suchitra and Rumina have mentioned, right? History of America, right? Which is very important point, because you can never separate history from literature. Okay, history and literature are inseparable, literally. So when you think of American literature, also think of American history. Now, what do I mean by American history? You don't have to know, who is the first president and all that. Okay. But my suggestion is to, watch a very quick video on YouTube or someplace. I mean, there are tons of videos on YouTube on American history, just to know what the country has gone through in the past 300 or so years. Okay. US got its independence in 1776. So from 1776 until to 2022, what happened? Very quickly, just go through that video when you have time in this week. That kind of sort of gives you the socio-political background of US. Okay, why will that help? That will give you knowledge about US. Not only that, but it also gives you ways of linking that country's history with the literature that we are talking about. Okay. because a lot of literature, when we talk about, and like I mentioned, we are going to talk about in terms of centuries. Okay. We will talk about what happened to poetry in 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, and 21st century. We are going to go by centuries. So when we do that, we should also know what happened to that country, what happened to US in that particular century. Okay. Because major events like getting independence, civil war, and the world wars, all these have had tremendous impact on literature. Okay. Now, this is not specific to American literature in no sense. Okay. This is, world wars have happened all over the world. So it has nothing to do with America in particular, but my suggestion is go and read. If you are interested in reading, yeah, sure. But then if you're short of time, please go and watch a video on YouTube on American literature, American history, so that you get some kind of feel of what the country has gone through in the past 300 years or so. All right. Okay. Now let's move on to the recurring themes. Again, like I said, you will have to reread this chapter multiple times, and then, understand what these recurring themes are, so that it is easier for you to link these themes to what you read in the next units, right? Okay. The first theme that your book talks about is wandering heroes. And we've talked at length in the offline classes about wandering heroes. I'm not sure if Charles is in this call, but then if he is, I would have asked him to just give a recap. But anyway, now what is wandering heroes? Imagine this, okay? People leave their home, go to some other place and settle there, right? This happens every time. Even now it happens. Now that explains the wandering part. Okay, we wander from one place to another place. But why are these people called heroes? Okay, why is this theme called wandering heroes? Now people move all the time. Like I said, even now people go from here to there, India to US, UK, Australia, everywhere else. So first thing is, can we call these wanderers? And can we call these people heroes? And I'm guessing the general answer is no, right? If somebody from your family goes to US, you don't call him a wandering hero or her a wandering hero, right? Why? Why don't we call them a wandering hero? Because the wandering heroes we are talking here are the kind of people who didn't know what was in store for them in the new place. So they left US and then went to various places, but they went to various places without knowing what is in store for them in the new place. Okay. Now somebody goes to US or UK or someplace, they have a plan. They know where they're going to. They are either going to, a university to study, or they're going for a job, or they're going to go get married to somebody there, whatever, right? People have plans and then they go, right? But the wandering heroes we're talking here, they didn't know what was in store for them in the new place. They just left the old place and then they started their journey to the new place. So this makes them wandering. Okay. And my favorite wandering hero is, we will talk about this story later in, I think, unit 6 or so. But this guy called Captain Ahab in Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Okay, Moby Dick is a book written by Herman Melville. And there is this character called Captain Ahab. Okay, he is a perfect example of a wandering hero. Okay, just remember this, and then we will come back to this theme in unit 6. All right, but for now, remember that wandering heroes are basically a major theme in American literature. Okay. Now the next theme that your book talks about is adventures. This is kind of self-explanatory, right? So now we have talked about a wandering hero. Now this guy just gets up from his home and then starts walking, going to some other place. Now he cannot just keep walking from one place to another and then settle down, right? He or she will have to go through adventures during their journey. Right. In fact, adventures are such an integral part or such an integral theme of American literature that you will see this word adventure in a lot of books themselves, right? Like books like, Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. The adventures is in the book's name. Okay. Or Saul Bellow's The Adventures of Augie March. These are the two examples that your book gives. But then I can think of at least one more, Howard Pyle's, The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. So adventures, the name itself has, the title of the book itself has this word. So it's that important. Now this kind of sort of leads us to the next theme, which is pioneers. Can someone explain to me who or what a pioneer is in general terms? Not in American literature terms, in general English, who is a pioneer or what is a pioneer?
Who confronts dangers, new dangers.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Ishrat?
Who confronts new dangers, who faces new dangers, like the wanderer in search of adventures becomes a pioneer. He confronts new dangers.
Okay. No, so let's not even go to American literature. The question is, in general, what is a pioneer? Who is a pioneer? So American literature perspective say you're right. Okay, a wanderer goes and becomes a pioneer. But what is a pioneer?
Experts.
So pioneer,
Experts.
excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Pioneer is the one who introduces a new thing. First time he do the experiments and introduce him to the public.
Okay, excellent. Kanya, right? That's who spoke.
Who explores new things.
Okay, good, Afros. Yeah. Yes, so you're right. Pioneer is somebody who talks about a certain thing first, a person who is among the first to explore or develop a certain thing. Okay, Suchitra, you're right. First person to do something. Now, how are these wandering heroes becoming pioneers? Like I think it was Afros. Like Afros said,
Who research a new technique first time.
sorry, say that again.
Scientist example.
Scientists, okay.
Who
Are
research
you able to
first
see the
a new
participants list right now on my screen?
Yes, sir.
Are you all able to see the participants list on my screen now, or is it just the PPT?
Yes.
PPT.
Just the PPT, right?
Yes.
We can see participants list. There's an icon, so which shows that
Yes.
participants are there.
Okay. No. I mean, I have a window open that says participants. You don't see my name, Brau, and then Afroz, Ayesha, Ishrat, all the names, right?
No, not like that.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't want to block the view of the PPT. That's all. Okay, good. So like you all said, pioneers are first to explore or develop. Now these wandering heroes, right? They got up one fine day and then they said, forget all this life. We are going to go to a different place. Now they got up, they are doing all these adventures and then going. But they are going to these places as first people, right? Our wandering heroes are, again, going through adventures and becoming pioneers. That's why this particular theme is there. But what are these pioneers looking for? These pioneers are looking for freedom and life fulfillment. Okay. Now we go back to that American dream, right? When we said pursuit of happiness, life fulfillment, and liberty are the ones that are characteristics of American dream, right? So our wandering heroes are just wandering, then they go through adventures, then they become pioneers. That too, not normal pioneers, they become pioneers who are looking for freedom and life fulfillment. Okay, so these guys are looking for certain things. All right. The next theme, I think, in your book is resourcefulness. Okay, now you people are really good at defining things. So somebody define resourcefulness for me. What is resourcefulness? Anybody?
Pardon?
What does somebody mean when they say resourcefulness? Resourcefulness of what or who?
Having skills.
Having skills. Okay. Having what kind of skills?
Work related
Okay.
or education related.
A stock
Okay.
or supply of money, materials, staff, and other assets can be drawn
I'm
from.
sorry. Can you just be a little louder? I'm not sure if everybody else is able to hear
Stock
you
or
properly.
supply of money, materials,
Okay.
staff, and other assets that can be
Okay.
drawn on by person or organization.
Okay. Okay, good. So resourcefulness basically is the ability to find very quick and clever ways of overcoming issues, okay, or problems or difficulty, whatever you call them. Okay. Some kind of ability a person has to find very quick and clever ways to overcome issues. Now, as an example, right? Let's say you are at your home and your gas cylinder is suddenly empty. Okay. you'll have to run to office or school or college or whatever. And then if in that situation, if you can find a way to still cook food, that is resourcefulness. Okay, you're basically you have the ability to find quick and clever ways to overcome these issues. Okay, that's resourcefulness. Now, coming back to the American literature thing, to find quick and clever ways to overcome issues. Good, Ramya. Yeah. So from an American literature perspective, you can see this resourcefulness in characters like Huckleberry Finn. This is a guy who starts out as like a very innocent guy. And then as the story progresses, who he basically white lies, but then he lies his way through to get out of his problems. Okay. So Finn's resourcefulness actually brought him out of his troubles. So this kind of resourcefulness where characters are shown to have the ability to quickly overcome issues, that is very prominent in American literature. Okay. The next one is male companionship. When we talk about male companionship, we are not talking about the sexual companionship. Okay. We are actually not talking about gay people here, but we are talking about male friendship that is not sexual most of the times. Okay. Like friendship. Okay. Now, going back to our book, right, Moby Dick, which I mentioned when I was talking about Wandering Heroes, there are two characters, Ishmael and then Queequeg. Okay, these are two friends who are basically on a ship, and the captain is Ahab, and then the whole thing revolves around these two people. In fact, if I remember it correctly, Moby Dick doesn't even have any female characters. Okay, it's completely filled with male characters. So there has to be some kind of male, camaraderie or companionship or friendship among those. So this kind of sort of comes out like a major theme in American literature. Okay. Another example is we have this Huckleberry Finn and then Jim. There also we see this male companionship. And we will also see this as one of the themes when we look at Eugene O'Neill's Desire Under the Elms. Okay. And I think Lily is here, but she very, very interestingly pointed out in the offline classes about how male companionship is one of the themes of this play. Okay, so we will talk about this male companionship in more detail as we go through the course. But for now, remember that male companionship is one of the major themes of American literature. Okay, moving on to alienation. Next theme is alienation. This is also pretty self-explanatory, but now when somebody is moving from one place to another, that person has to adjust to the new place, new culture, new people, and everything, right? Now, what happens is, now imagine yourself, okay? Imagine yourself as a subject, and you are moving from, let's say India is your home, and then you're moving from India to, let's say, Australia or someplace, okay? Now, when you go there, you will immediately be confronted with things like, quest for identity, and then, you're trying to accustom yourself into the new culture, new people there, the way things are done there and everything, right? Now, think of the early centuries, all right? Now, at least this quest for identity is in a multicultural global world, this quest for identity is kind of sort of on the back burner. But think about the previous centuries where people go from one place to another place and they had no idea about what the new place will look like. Okay. Now, what they will be confronted with is this quest for identity of, first question will be, who am I? And then what am I doing here? And how do I fit into this whole, structure of this new culture, etc. So this is a very, very common theme in American literature. But I'll have to mention here that this is not a common theme just in American literature. If you think about any literature, British literature, Indian literature, especially diaspora literature, this quest for identity is the topmost theme that you can see in diaspora literature. Do you know what diaspora literature is? Diaspora literature, anybody?
Yes. It's about, if I'm in America, I'm writing about India, so that is diaspora.
If you are in America and writing about India, and you're an Indian.
I'm an Indian, yes.
Yeah, you're an Indian in America writing about India. Okay, that's diaspora. Okay, yeah, right. quest for identity is again acculturation and a customization of people to the new culture. All these are, like I said, are the major themes of diaspora. So alienation and quest for identity are not only themes of American literature, they are also themes of many other literatures. I mean, it pretty much, you wouldn't find any literature that does not have this theme in it. Now, which kind of conveniently moves us to the next theme, which is isolation. This is again very, very self-explanatory. Basically, alienation leads to a sense of isolation, right? You move from, let's take Lily's example. You move from India to US and then you're alienated there, but then you're also isolated, right? I mean, again, don't think about these themes in the modern sense, okay? Now you can say basically, yeah, fine, I'll go from India to US and then I have my family there, friends there, my colleagues there. I don't feel isolated, right? Which is fine. But don't think about these themes in the modern times. Think about these themes from the history perspective, all right? So when our wandering heroes going through adventures, becoming pioneers with their resourcefulness, go into this alienated land, they experience isolation. Let's put it that way. Okay, so all these themes are interrelated. Why isolation? Because they don't have a sense of belonging, right? They feel out of place. And then what this leads to is they reject the society as if they don't fit into that society. Okay, so then this leads to them living alone and not being part of that society.
Excuse me, sir, your voice is a little bit slow. Can you make your voice louder?
Okay, is everybody having the same problem?
No, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, because the person just spoke. Ayesha, I'm actually not able to hear you properly. Your voice is very low. Is that the same? Is that the same for everybody else? Can everybody hear Ayesha properly?
No.
I think she's very far from the mic or from the speaker.
Ayesha, can you come closer to the mic and then?
Voice is clear, but not louder.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's the same issue that I'm having from your side. Actually, your voice is clear. I can hear you. It's just that just check if your volume is 100%. Just try that out. I'll try to speak a little louder, but
okay.
If I speak any louder, I think others will have a problem because they can hear me clearly.
But I have to be in front of my phone. Yes. Okay, continue, sir. No problem.
I still can't hear Ayesha actually, but I think she said continue.
Continue, sir. It's I can hear you.
Okay, all right. Okay, where were we? Isolation, right? So this alienation, it leads to them living alone and not being part of the society. We will talk about this theme more in, I think we'll talk about Light in August somewhere in block 3 or 4. We'll talk about William Faulkner's Light in August. And then we'll see how this character called Joe Christmas, he's a subject of this alienation and how it pans out in his life. Okay. So for now, remember that isolation is one of the major themes. Now, the next theme that your book talks about is innocence and experience. What is innocence and experience? Okay. This basically is a path where a character starts out very innocent and then he or she moves into the area of experience. Okay. As an example, there's a short story by Hemingway, which is called My Old Man. It's a story about a young boy named Joe. This guy has, his father is a horse jockey. I don't know how to explain a horse jockey. This is a guy, you know, this, what is it called? The horse races or whatever they do, right? So this fellow is the one who rides that horse. Okay. So he's the horse jockey. The father is a horse jockey. And Joe kind of idolizes him because the father is a hero for Joe. So Joe starts off with that innocence, saying that, you know, my dad is a hero, my dad is great, and this, that, and all. But then later in the story, he realizes that his father actually takes bribes, okay, and then he kind of rigs the whole race, okay. So that kind of shatters this fellow's whole misconception or conception of his father, where he thought the father is a hero. Okay, so that's what this theme means. So this character Joe is moving from innocence to experience. It's the same thing with Huckleberry Finn also. He starts out like a very innocent guy, and then because of what he goes through in life, he becomes an experienced person. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, this is my actually the first one is my favorite because we can actually have a discussion. And this is also a universal theme. It has nothing to do especially with American literature. This is a very, very universal theme, and that is a racial problem. Okay, you all know what racial problem is, right? I mean, basically discriminating somebody based on their race. Now, to understand this, right, we'll have to understand two phrases that are used to describe American society. All right. One is something called a melting pot. Okay. Now, what is a melting pot? Okay. Somebody is drawing on the screen. Can you stop drawing on the screen? I just saw 2 arrows or something. Whoever that is, please stop drawing on the screen. Okay. Thank you. Okay, melting pot. What is a melting pot? Melting pot basically is like kind of like a soup where you throw in everything into one pot and then, you just boil it. Okay. So what happens in a melting pot after at the end product, right? You cannot, let's say you throw in tomatoes, onions, and something else into a pot, and then you make a mush out of it, and then you call it a soup. Okay. Now the end product, right? You cannot distinguish between tomatoes, onions, and I don't know what else you put in a soup, but these two things, right? They are all kind of intermingled, and then they don't have a separate identity, right? So initially, American society was called a melting pot because because of the immigration, everybody came into the American society and then kind of sort of had one particular culture, which is the American culture, right? But this term, right, doesn't make any justice to the reality. American society is not actually a melting pot. So then people started using a new term. And then they said, okay, American society is not a melting pot. We will call it a salad bowl. Okay, salad bowl is basically, in a salad, you'll have, I don't know, carrots, tomatoes, and onions and whatever. And then you throw them into the same bowl or plate, right? But they will still have their individual identity. You can still say this is tomato, this is onion, this is carrot, this is cabbage, whatever, right? So basically they said this is American society is a salad bowl because everybody is living together in the same bowl, same plate, but we can still identify them individually. Okay, so let's say Jewish people have come in, Indians have come in, Black people have come into US. All of them are living together, but they still have their individual identity. Okay, this is kind of sort of, I think I mentioned this in the offline class, but this is kind of sort of what, our guy Shashi Tharoor, right? The Kerala politician, he compares Indian society with a thali. Okay, that I think we will relate to it more because we are all Indians. You'll have in a thali, right? An Indian thali, you'll have roti, dal, sambar, curd, rice, whatever, right? I mean, you'll have all those in the same plate, but each has its own identity. Okay, so Shashi Tharoor basically says Indian society is like a thali where, every person has their own individual identity, but we are also together as a nation. Okay, so it's kind of sort of like that. A salad bowl is kind of sort of like a thali. There are some differences, but we'll not get into that. Then they said, well, you know what? A melting pot is definitely not making sense. Salad bowl is kind of sort of making sense, but it is still not reflective of the reality. Okay, so then people came up with something called quilt. Okay, that is what I don't know how to explain a quilt, so that's why I put a picture on the screen. Okay, this is kind of sort of like, that bed covering or whatever you make from individual fabric pieces.
It's a patchwork.
Okay, yeah, let's call it a patchwork. Okay, you put multiple rags together or whatever and make a quilt. Okay, so then they said, okay, American society is like a quilt where there are different fabric pieces sewn together to make a quilt. And then they all have, again, their individual identity, but they're all also together as a quilt. Okay. So the solidarity comes when you look at it as the quilt. Okay. The togetherness comes only when you look at it as a quilt. You cannot just, rip open one particular part of the quilt and then say, yeah, this is my identity, so I will just live like my own identity, with my own identity, right? That's fine, but then you're still not part of the whole society, right? So they came up with this whole concept of quilt. Okay, all these are metaphors. Okay, you'll have to understand that all these are metaphors. They're not saying, like, blacks are carrots and then Jews are tomatoes and Indians are onions. They're not saying that. They're just using these as salad bowl, melting pot, quilt, all of these as metaphors for the society. Okay, and why do we have to do this for American society? Why can't we do this for, let's say, like, I don't know, Japanese or Chinese or whoever? Now, the reason why we'll have to do this is Japanese or Chinese culture and society is a very homogeneous society. Homogeneous basically means, a likeness. There is a likeness. Through centuries, the Japanese or Chinese society has not changed. But American society is not like that. American society has tons of immigrants who have come into the society, and then which kind of brought a change in the American culture as a whole. Okay, so that is why we don't use these metaphors like, salad bowl and melting pot or quilt or whatever for Japanese. And I'm sorry, something just popped up. I don't know what this is. Okay. So we don't talk about these cultures in these terms, but then we do say American society. Okay. Now, why are we talking about melting pot and salad bowl and quilt? What has that got to do with racial problem? To understand that, let's go back a little bit. Okay. Now, before American independence in 1776, in fact, even before 1865, right? The whole culture was getting slaves from Africa and other places to work in cotton plantations. Okay, so there were a lot of cotton plantations in America, and then because the white man thought he is way too good for, menial physical labor, they got people from Africa as slaves, and then they treated them as slaves. Basically, what I mean by treated them as slaves is they were treated very, very lowly. Okay. They didn't have any proper living situation. They didn't have any proper food to eat. And then they didn't obviously have any money. Okay. They were kind of bonded laborers. Now, all that happened. America got independence in 1776. But one important thing that you'll have to remember is slavery was not abolished in 1776 in America. They got independence. That's fine. But slavery was only abolished in 1865. So it took a solid more than 85 years for them to abolish slavery. So you can see how rooted this particular racial problem is in the American literature or in society as general. Okay. Now, we can go two ways from here, right? There are people who say, yeah, fine, Ashwin, you're talking about, 300, 400 years ago, things have changed. Now there is no racial discrimination or anything. Okay. There are a set of people who will say that. There are also a set of people who will say, no, this racial problem still exists. You look at the newspaper and then you will know that the racial problem still exists. Okay. So that is an individual perception, and we are not going to go into that argument or discussion, but we will remember that America as a melting pot, salad bowl, quilt, whatever you want to call it, is a coming togetherness of a lot of people, okay, from different cultures, different backgrounds, different nations, coming together to form an American culture. Okay. And racial problems are inherent in the society, and this becomes a very, very, very prominent and integral theme of American literature. Okay. Does anybody have anything to add to what we just talked about, racial problem? And do you think, okay, let me ask a question. Do you think racial problem is something specific to American literature? Do you still find it in any other literature also?
Yes, it is similar to Indian literature also. I'll give you one example, like you said about quilt or salad bowl.
South Africa is considered as rainbow nation because too many races are living in that country.
Right.
So there is, I mean, at the moment, there is no racial issues, but there used to be blacks and whites too much at that time before Mandela. I mean, before Mandela was selected as president, they had that issue. So now it's not there. But coming to India, we still have this racism when it comes to caste and creed or religion. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, good. Anything else? Anybody? Thanks, Lily. But any other insights from anybody else? Okay, that's fine. Let's just move on in the interest of time. Okay, I just want to finish, just to let you know, right? I'll just finish the class at around 1:25 to 1:27. Okay, just so that you guys at least have like 3-4 minutes of break. I know that you don't have a break between sessions. So I think a 3-minute break will be at least, better for everybody. So somebody keep a watch on time, and then can you please let me know if I'm going beyond 1:27? Just let me know, and then I'll stop there. All right.
It's 1 o'clock 5 minutes.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again, Ishrat?
It's 1 o'clock 5 minutes, sir, so we have time.
Okay, okay. Okay, let's just move on to the next theme then, which is crime and violence. Now this is again. Oh, sorry. This is again something that is self-explanatory. Wherever there is war for independence, there will be violence. You know that. In fact, wherever there is war for anything, there will be violence. And then, like we just talked about, there is violence involved in slavery because there is, oppressed and the oppressor. So obviously there will be some kind of violence involved. And then there are cases of domestic violence, which is another type of violence, and which is pretty too common now also. So as you can see, it's very, very easy to understand why crime and violence are a very common theme in American literature. Again, this is not something very specific to American literature. It is common to pretty much every literature that you talk about. Any literature that you talk about, you will have some kind of violence depicted in it. Okay. Now, this might not be a temporal thing. I mean, I'm not saying that, crime and violence was the major theme in the 18th century, 19th century, or the 21st century. I'm just saying overall, crime and violence would be a major theme in any part of the world. All right. Okay. The next theme that we are going to talk about is the Protestant ethic. Okay. Now, like I mentioned in the offline classes, right, my preference would be for you to call this Protestant work ethic. Okay. And not generalize it saying that this is the Protestant ethic as a whole. Okay. Why? Because if you look at the explanation, they're talking about the work ethic. What is this Protestant work ethic? Now, Protestant work ethic in simple words is if you work hard, you'll succeed. Full stop. Okay. Which is the kind of philosophy that most of us still carry, right? You see your parents telling you, you see your, your mentors telling you, everybody telling you, work hard, work hard, work hard, you'll succeed, right? They're talking about the Protestant work ethic. We will talk about, like I said, Eugene O'Neill's Desire Under the Elms. It's a play written by O'Neill. And then there is this character called Ephraim Cabot. I think, again, in the offline classes, I think Lily kind of mentioned about this, but there is this character called Ephraim Cabot, and he cultivates a land that is not arable. Not arable basically means you cannot cultivate it and then grow any crops in it. Okay. So he takes a piece of land which is pretty much useless, and then he converts it into a crop growing land only by his hard work. Okay. He works so hard, he and his family work so hard that they make this non-arable land into an agricultural land. Okay. So you can see the Protestant work ethic here. If you work hard, you'll succeed. Ephraim Cabot and his family worked hard, and then their hard work paid off in the form of a good land where they cultivated it, and then they grew crops. Now, Protestant work ethic is also called Calvinistic work ethic. We're not going to get into why it's called Calvinistic work ethic, but just remember that. Okay. Now, basically, it underscores discipline, hard work, and related areas for success. Okay, they basically say work really hard, and then success is bound to follow. Okay. Next one is man versus nature. Again, I'll go back to my favorite example, Moby Dick. But before that, right? Why man versus nature? Because this is different from other literatures, because American literature is mostly not concerned with the usual, romantic love stories or romance stories otherwise, but they're more concentrated on man versus nature. And going back to my example on Moby Dick, right? This guy, Captain Ahab. I'm not sure how many of you are aware or how many of you are familiar with the story or the plot line of Moby Dick, but it's about this crazy guy called Captain Ahab, who is the captain of a ship, and then he goes behind this white shark or a whale. Excuse me. And then he basically goes into the ocean, wide ocean, and then tries to kill that a particular beast. Okay, so the whole story revolves around how he gets in, how he forms his team, and then goes onto the oceans, and then tries to kill it, and then he meets other people on different ships and all about that. But anyway, so as you can see, Ahab in Moby Dick is actually the competition is between man and nature, because it is between him and a beast, one, and it is between him and the ocean. Okay, he's not going to fight another man. So there's something of this sort is pretty common in American literature. All right. One other thing that your book lists is symbol and allegory. What is symbolism? Symbolism. Okay, can anybody tell me what symbolism is? No one? Or can you guess what a symbol is? What can be a symbol? One kind of symbol is, these religious symbols, or, an om or cross or something, right? But that's not the symbol that we are talking about, kind of sort of that symbol, but not specific to religious symbol. What I mean by symbolism here, or what the authors of your book mean by symbolism here is something that stands for something else. Okay. It can be a metaphor for something else. We discussed about metaphor in the offline classes, but if you're really interested, or if you are not familiar with what a metaphor is, please go and then Google it. It's pretty simple to understand. It is one of the tools of figurative language. So one thing stands for another thing. That's basically metaphor, or symbolism basically is in that sense. Now, let me take an example and then explain what symbolism is, or even an allegory. Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter is one of his works, where this protagonist, there is this lady called Hester Prynne, who is basically a woman who has an extramarital affair. Okay, she goes and then has an affair with somebody who is not her husband. All right, so she is basically got into the court, and then she's sentenced to wear this letter A. Okay, from the alphabet, English alphabet A, the letter A, for the rest of her life. So basically she has to wear this letter on her for the rest of her life. This letter A is a symbol of, or it stands for adultery. Okay, adultery is basically, having a affair with somebody else apart from your spouse. So the court basically declares that this lady has to wear the letter A. So you can look at it from two ways, right? One is, if you don't look at it as a symbol, then it seems stupid to ask somebody to wear the letter A, right? How does it matter if they wear A or B or C or whatever? But if you look at it from a symbol perspective, then the letter A, like I said, symbolizes adultery. Okay, so because she has committed adultery, she has to wear A. Okay, so this is what they mean by symbolism. Now, these kind of symbols, metaphors, allegories are abundant in American literature. Okay, again, this is not just an American literature thing. Okay, most of what we are discussing are recurring themes in any other literature. All right, symbolism and allegory are themes of many other literatures. All right, I remember, I think it was Afroz who has kind of sort of enlightened us on what is the difference between allegory, fable, and I forgot what the third one.
Yes.
Afterwards, what was
Yes.
it?
An allegory is a narrative or visual representation in which a character, place, or event can be interpreted.
Okay.
It is an allegory.
Okay. What is a fable then?
Fable is also a narrative form, usually featuring animals that behave and speak like human beings.
Right. Okay. What was the third one that we discussed? We discussed
Parable.
Parable. Yeah. What is a parable?
A parable is a short story that teaches or moral or spiritual lessons, like Bible. Example, Bible.
Okay. You mean parables in Bible, right? Bible
Yes,
itself
yes.
is not
The story is told by Jesus Christ and recorded in Bible.
Okay. Okay. Good. Oh, I'm so glad that you remembered all that. But yeah, so like Afroz said, there are subtle differences between allegories, parables, and fables, but all these are a major part of any literature, and American literature in particular. Okay, symbol and allegory. Oh, that kind of sort of sums up your this thing. But what I want to do is at the end of each class, right? Okay, how much time do we have? About 10 more minutes, right? Okay, at the end of each class, right? If you have any questions or if you want to discuss any theme in particular, you're more than welcome to do that. But if nobody has anything to discuss or say or add to that discussion, what we'll do is we will just go through the sample examination questions from each unit and then see how to answer those in the exam. Okay, why do I want to do this in every class? Because it is all fresh in our minds. Okay, we've just talked about the topics in this unit, and then it'll be easier for us to actually kind of sort of relate it to the questions. All right, how does that sound? That sounds okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so one of the questions that your book has, I think, is how is American literature different from other literatures? Okay. Excuse me. So now we've talked about this at the initial part of this class. We talked about how we can kind of sort of talk about Telugu literature, French literature, Hindi literature, and everything, but we cannot talk about something called American literature from a linguistic perspective because there is nothing called an American language, right? So you can start this answer with how you can talk about or give examples of French literature or something that is specific to a language, and then describe why it is different from American literature and how is it different from American literature. All right. So usually this should be a short answer question. So you shouldn't take more than a page to actually explain this. All right. Now, the next question that they've given is discuss 3 recurring themes in American literature and show their interrelationships. Now, this is a little complicated. But if you really understand the structure of this whole unit, right, it is easy. Why I'm saying that is 3 recurring themes you can easily find out, right? Like I said, you will have to reread this chapter anyway, and then any day, any night, you will easily recollect what 3 themes from all the themes that we have talked about. That is not a big deal. But how are you going to interrelate those? Okay, the question is also asking you to interrelate those. Now, I kind of sort of alluded to this in one of my statements that I made earlier in this class, but we started with wandering heroes, and then we kind of sort of related them to adventures, and then kind of sort of related them to pioneers, right? So you can take these 3 themes and then talk about their interrelatedness, or you can talk about alienation first, and then kind of sort of relate it to isolation. Okay. Excuse me. And then talk about, something related to isolation also. You can pick 3 themes like that and then talk about it. All right. So basically read the question and then attempt to answer every single thing that they're asking. Okay. Just don't put 3 random recurring themes. Okay. Don't basically, my whole point is don't start with wandering heroes and then directly go to racial problem and then end with man versus nature. Okay. Now you can relate anything to anything in some way or the other, but don't try to relate, irrelevant things in your answer. Take the easiest ones, make your job easier. Take the easiest ones, interrelate them properly, and then that should be your strategy. All right. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Now let me end with a few questions. Okay. Any one of you can answer. You can type it in the chat box, or you can basically speak out. Okay. Why am I doing this? This is not to test you or anything in any way. This is basically to make sure that all of us are on the same page. Okay. All of us understood what we have discussed today. All right. Again, like I said, it's not a one-way lecture where I just keep saying something and then you just keep absorbing it. My preference is we discuss, and then I think I've had really good participation from you, which I really appreciate. Let's continue that in the next classes, also in the next 7 classes. So let's just have some recap questions. Okay. Can somebody explain what is the Protestant work ethic? What are we talking about here?
It is if one works hard, one can succeed, or one can get rich and hence prosper, be happy. It's a Protestant work ethic.
Okay, good. Okay. Can somebody else explain what is the theme isolation? What does it mean?
Leaving their families and moving to another country or state, whatever. So, and living alone. So it's the isolation.
Living alone is isolation. Very good. Okay. Okay, good. And okay, now I want 2 people to answer this question. Okay. Mention one universal theme in the themes we discussed. Now, what is a universal theme? It is a theme that is not specific to American literature. It is kind of sort of universal. Okay. It is also common for every other thing. Okay. Yeah, Lily, sorry, go ahead. Racism. Perfect. Okay. Can somebody else give an answer? Not Ishrat, not Lily, not Afroz. I also want to hear others' voices.
Quest for identity.
Very good, Aisha. Yes, quest for identity. All right, good. Okay, I'm glad that you people are listening. That's the good part. Now, what the expectation for the next class is? You read this first unit, okay? Because, like I said, this is a very important unit. Read this first unit. Come up with questions if you have any. It doesn't have to be only questions, okay? If you want to add something, you're more than welcome to do that. Come back next week with your comments, whatever, okay? And discussion, and then we will take it from there. So next class, what we'll do is we'll start with what we have talked about in this unit, and then we'll talk about unit 2, which will complete very soon, okay? It basically talks about Native American literature. There's not much to talk about Native American literature because from a research perspective, there's a lot to be done yet to find out what Native American literature is. One of the reasons is because there's no written, majority of the Native American literature is not written. And like we talked about, our folk literature at the starting of this class, it's more an oral narrative, all right? So that is one reason. But we will very quickly talk about Native American literature in the next class. Then we'll move on to the colonial period. And then we will for sure complete unit 3. And then if time is there, then we'll go to unit 4. All right. So the next class will be a little faster. It will not be this slow because I just wanted to concentrate on unit 1 for a full class. But because we only have 8 classes, we will rush a little bit, but then we will complete 20 units in our 8 classes. All right. I want to keep the last class for questions, comments, and, any major questions or anything, but we'll see how it goes. All right.
Sir, do we know when the exams will start?
Aisha, I can't hear you at all. Like literally, I know that you're speaking. I just can't hear you. Can anybody else hear Aisha? If you can hear, can you repeat what she just said, please?
Now you can.
She wants to know when the exams will be conducted.
Oh, I am not sure of that. You'll have to either contact, the admin or the management, or contact the student services unit. Okay, I have absolutely no idea when the exams will be conducted, but I'm sure they will let you know well in advance. Okay. Okay. Any other questions from anybody else? If not, I'll give you your 5 minutes break and then you can join the next one at, I don't know, 1:30, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. No, 23, 123.
No. Can somebody repeat what Ayesha said? I can't hear at all.
Sir, it's 124. Can you hear me now?
Folks, can anybody hear what Ayesha is saying? I know that she's speaking. I just can't hear it.
Repeat, Aisha.
Okay, I don't know. Seems like she's logged off. I'm not sure. But Aisha, if you're still there, you can also type in the chat because we are unable to hear you. Okay, let's just take a pause here for today and continue in the next class. Like I said, in the next class, we will move on to unit 2, 3, and 4, hopefully, of the course book. And yeah, thank you for joining the class and see you all next week.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.